Hello and welcome to the Somerset Diverse Communities podcast. My name is Michał and I am a BAME Community Engagement Officer from Community Council for Somerset. This show is about Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities in Somerset. I'm on the Ham Hill in Yeovil. It's a scheduled ancient monument, but today I didn't come here to learn about the history of this mysterious place, but together with my colleagues from Somerset Diverse Communities, Jusna and Jinny, we will talk about the identity. Hi guys, good to see you after such a long time.
Hi, nice to see you in real person.
Yeah, it's lovely, and we're in this amazing spot as well in South Somerset.
And it's gorgeous. The sun is out and it's blue skies. It's really nice.
As I've mentioned already, we would like to talk about identity. So, what does it mean actually? It's like almost philosophical question. How do we identify our sense of belonging? Who are we, basically?
It's a philosophical question.
Quite deep,
Yeah, it is.
this time of the day.
It is. I tick the white British box in the ethnicity, but I think I struggle a bit with the white British box because of the connotations of nationalists and the flag and lots of things that I don't feel part of. I've also lived in lots of places all over the world. And so, yeah, I'm very proud of coming from a multicultural country. I think that's a really wonderful thing. Whereas I think as other people who would identify as white British, some people, you know, a minority perhaps, don't view that. And maybe sometimes I feel I have more in common with people with shared values. Yeah.
Do you feel embarrassed then a little bit?
I don't feel embarrassed. I don't think that's the right. I just don't feel any connection with, you know, skinheads and the St George's flag and like, you know, recently there's been quite a lot of trying to lots of flag waving again. And it's like, what's it covering up?
Well, I guess it's with Brexit, isn't it? That's all come to the forefront again. Would you say? I've been seeing that more and more.
I think Brexit has really just put the microscope on the division in this country. And we were talking about it earlier when we were talking about identity in terms of polarisation, and I do worry about that.
In your opinion, what does it mean to be British? Is it having a citizenship, being born here, speaking the language, or eating Marmite? Do I need to do those things in order to be British?
Fish and chips, I reckon. Definitely fish and chips. I don't know. I mean,
I don't think you need to live here, because I think you can definitely be British and live elsewhere. I don't think you need to be born here, because I think you can be British and born elsewhere. And this is where I think it becomes really complicated. You know, like with that British citizenship test, I don't think I'd pass that.
No, I was looking at the book and I'm like, I don't know half this stuff in there.
Yeah.
Like, whoa.
It seems a very odd way to test Britishness, about whether you know a bit of history and some odd laws and that not necessarily everyone adheres to.
Yeah, on the other day I had a phone call from someone who was asking for support. There's a person with learning disabilities, and that person didn't pass the exam a few times in a row because she struggled to learn in general.
Yes, that's awful.
But her husband is British, and she just wanted to apply for British passport, but she can't because she doesn't remember those things.
You would thought there was
Mitigating circumstance, like that is awful. See, that makes me very unproud to be British.
Now you're answering the embarrassment bit, aren't you?
Oh, that is. That's awful.
Okay, it seems like the simplest questions always turn out to be the most difficult to answer. To help ourselves, we will focus on cultural identity. So, we would need to consider things like nationality, ethnicity, race, tradition, cultural customs, language, social class, and religion. So cultural identity, it's as I've mentioned, it's some kind of sense of belonging to a group. It's a part of person's self-conceptions and self-perception. So yeah, how do you perceive yourself? Jinny already mentioned what is your attitude to being British, but what about you, Jusna?
I see myself as being British. I wasn't born in Britain, I was born in Bangladesh, but I think I grew up all mixed up, basically. I grew up in South Somerset, and I have so many different identities because my upbringing was just so different to anybody else's here. So I grew up in Yeovil, but we were the only Asian family in Yeovil at the time. So we didn't, and then when you turned on the TV, you didn't have the kind of Asian role models or seeing Asian people on the TV. So you didn't have a sense of connection with the kind of outside world. So I grew up really in a bit of a bubble. My family are sort of fairer skinned, I guess, than me. So I'm always seen as the darker skinned person in the family. So in a lot of ways, I just didn't fit in anywhere. I mean, I didn't fit in with my family because of the dark skin. When I went to school, I was, the girl who was brown and wore salwar kameez, which was seen as why do you wear a dress with your trousers? So trying to answer that question. And in wider society, going out and about, there were no other people like me really walking down the street. So when we did see another person of colour or a family, I mean myself, I would stare at them thinking, my God, where on earth have you come from then? Really intrigued, because we were, the only black family really in Yeovil. So it was difficult really to have an identity. I really didn't see myself as being Asian, I have to say. It's only now in the later years, and I've discovered a little bit more about myself and having discussions with other women of colour, that I realised I identified with being from kind of African heritage. I think it was my skin tone that made me feel that way anyway. And when I turned on the TV, the only kind of black role models I could see were people, so for example, on The Cosby Show. And as I grew up a bit more, it was like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and I thought, yeah, that must be me. That identified with that culture because of the skin colour, and particularly when I was that age, it was Rudy in The Cosby Show, and that's who
didn't love Rudy.
And I felt I was kind of her, but I didn't see myself as being Asian. And then I had the other issue of having a faith, being Muslim. And how that affected things growing up, and people seeing me differently, sometimes fasting during Ramadan, why aren't you eating, all those kind of questions really. So identity for me was quite fluid, and it kind of still is, I think. I just identify in so many different ways. So when I'm with a group of women, for example, who are politically black or of colour, I identify with them, and when I'm with a group of Muslim women or Muslim people in general, I identify there. So it's really difficult for me to kind of put a finger on I'm that, but I do see myself as being British. I see that as a really positive thing. I love the fact that I have a different culture that I can bring into it, and I like the fact that I can mix it up, mix up the good things of white British culture and the good things of Bangladeshi Muslim culture, and make a kind of culture of my own with my family and my children and my wider extended family as well. And I think that's lovely. I think that's what it should be, and I don't think it should be static or
When you had kids, did you start to think about some of these things a bit more, about what cultural identity you wanted to bring them up with?
I did, yeah. I think there's certain times in your life where things sort of change your view, and I think having children did. As the children grew up, I wanted to teach them their first language, which was Bengali, at home, and my dad's always been really, really clear. teach them at home, and then, you know, they're settled for the rest of their lives. And I think with my eldest I really put the effort into there. And then when you have the second child and then the third child came, and it was just too tiring. And then, you know, you just think, oh gosh, CBBS, you know, and they sit in front of the TV, and then the oldest goes to school and he kind of loses his own that linguistic ability in Bengali, and he starts taking on the more English, and then he comes home and talks to the other children in English, and because I am more fluent in English, I mean, I'm bilingual, but I would say I'm much more fluent in English because I developed English in this country. I went to school, went to college, went to university, whereas in Bengali it was kind of everything that I learnt was from my parents, so whatever they could teach me, it kind of stopped there. So in fact I can't write Bengali, very, very basic, or read it. It's very, very basic, and also it's the dialect of the particular region that we're from as well. So the book language, or the language that's spoken, you know, internationally, is not the language that I speak, and so it stopped at a certain point. The development of that language until I got married, and then that increased because my husband was very into languages. So I think with the children, this thing about identity, I had a thing with my youngest, who's about 9, and he doesn't see himself as being anything different at all. I mean, he sees himself as, you would even probably identify as white British, to be fair. I mean, it's just, I'm English, I don't come from Bangladesh. And I said, yeah, but that's your ethnic background. But he couldn't understand the concept of that. And I think the school that they go to as well, the EAL, so that the percentage of children from different backgrounds is about 65%. So they don't see themselves as being different. They see themselves as being part of a, you know, the
multicultural.
Yeah, that's what it is, I think. And it's like, we're not different. Whereas for me, I grew up completely differently. I felt different, I was different, and I was just trying to find my way in life, particularly growing up somewhere that's completely rural. And, you know, you do face issues around discrimination in all walks of life. But I don't think my children have felt that the way I have at their age. And I do have discussions with them about it, because obviously I'm into that and find that fascinating. But they don't, strangely enough.
What about you?
Yeah, Michał, tell us about yourself.
What does it mean to be Polish?
What does it mean to be Polish? You know, I think it's your cultural identity. It depends on the constant interaction with the community that you grew in, but also with the local people or in new country. I've got roots in Poland, but it feels like I don't understand Poland anymore, or I don't want to understand, or I prefer the self-conception of myself in Britain. I speak Polish at home after hours usually. I've got lots of Polish friends in the UK as well, but I don't live in Poland. And when I come back to Poland from time to time, when I visit Poland, I don't recognize myself anymore in terms of how I perceived myself before I left Poland.
I was going to ask a question. Do you think you'll merge into feeling, yes, I think I could be British at some point?
I think we would need to come back to the question at the beginning of the podcast. What does it mean to be British? Because if I can identify myself after a period of time, let's say I will stay here for another 20 years, and it will turn out that actually I've been living here longer than in Poland, and my language will improve, and I will understand the customs more. I will make more friends with British people, and so on and so on. And then I can realize that actually I've got more attachments to Britain than to Poland. However, there's some kind of sense of belonging with the limitation, because I will be missing those roots. I didn't grow in this society, I doubt that there's a way to catch up. I'm never gonna be like a British person. I don't think so.
You never like your Marmite?
No way.
Yeah, that's the difference, I think, between you and me, because you grew up in Poland, so you had the socialisation obviously in Poland, and then you know, in your adult age you kind of came over to the UK, whereas with me, I was born somewhere else, came here, and have had that dual upbringing, where I'd had the language of the Bengali and the Islamic identity at home, and then when I was out and about, it was bringing part of that into it, but never really feeling like I really belonged anywhere, to be fair. That's how I felt. Sounds quite sad, really, but on the other side of things, when I do go to Bangladesh, I do feel part of that more so than anyone else would. So I do feel there's that connection, that the roots are there, because we did go quite frequently as we grew up. So yeah, I think for all of us, isn't it? Identity just means so many different things.
When I was a kid, I grew up in the States, so that's where I first went to school. That's where I sort of, from about 3 to 6, I was, maybe longer, 7. And at school you had to stand outside the flag and you had to sing national anthem every Monday morning, and they had, it was presidential elections, and I wasn't allowed to vote in the presidential elections in like kindergarten. I really didn't understand why, because I was American as far as I knew. I just didn't know any different. I was in class with all my American friends and everybody else was allowed to vote, but I wasn't. And it's just, and that's always stuck with me, like, I wasn't allowed to vote.
Gosh, it's strange,
weird
isn't it,
things that stick. Yeah, and I had like really American accent, and then when I came back to the UK, the teacher hated that. And the teacher would make me sit and wriggle until I asked to go to the toilet rather than to ask to go to the bathroom, and about to wee my pants.
Gosh.
But she was having none of it, that I was going to speak with any American twang or phrases or really
kind of
odd.
worked, didn't it?
yeah, totally.
Where did it go?
Yeah, it totally went.
Gosh. So you did feel quite different when you grew up. You knew what it felt like just for those primary years, like you weren't allowed to be part of something that you felt you were part of.
Yeah, and I think because I have lived in Australia I've lived in different places. Yeah.
It broadens your horizons when you move around, I think. You
Yeah.
see life differently, don't you? Instead of being in one place and seeing the people in one place, you kind of find that there's a bigger world out there and there's more to life. And and those stereotypes are often decreased because you have contact with people you probably wouldn't have contact with.
And different world views, which are just wonderful.
Yeah, travelling makes a huge difference. I found that in my life, actually. People well travelled are just so open, so much more open than people who aren't, who've never left a particular area of where they've grown up.
Just before the podcast, we talked about the mental health. That's another challenge, and I think the identity it's related to mental health. You need to know who you are in general, not only from the perspective of the culture or your origin, but in general. But migrants or people who have got the sense of belonging to other ethnicity, other country, they may feel lost. What is your opinion about it?
I would think that it would depend on whether, people were newly arrived or that they've been there for first generation or second generation, as to how they fit into culture, how they fit into their surroundings. I think my family my parents were, they were newly arrived at one point, and they were very, very strong about keeping the culture, making sure the language was spoken in the house, so we were completely fluent and bilingual, so when we went to Bangladesh we were able to talk.
Did your dad speak English before he came?
No, not at all.
No. Okay.
And even when he was, he's been here for sort of 40 years odd, but his English wasn't great. He worked in a restaurant, so it wasn't, didn't have that really much opportunity. So it was really important for him, but not so important for me with my children. I mean, it was something I would have liked that they had the language, and they don't really, but it's not the be all and end all, because I've come to recognise that a merging of different cultures and languages and things is just such a beautiful thing. And then maybe that's just me, I don't know, but it just feels like people will find their own identities and let them be happy with that. And I think for my children that's what I would want. They would probably be different with their children, And one of my children said to me, "Oh gosh, you know, you're not talking to us in Bengali and we're going to lose that part." I was like, I can do, but I'm so fluent in English that I often don't. And then there are my other children will say, you know, we're happy as we are. So I think when they have children, they'll have a different identity. They'll be third or fourth generation. I think that's the beauty of culture, isn't it? It's just always interchanging. It's so fluid. And I just love that. I just love that, non-rigidity about it.
I'm always jealous of people who speak more than, I say this all the time, I'm really jealous of people who speak more than one language, because of you get to understand things in different ways and in different concepts, because it opens your mind to viewing things in different ways, because there are nuances that are very particular to language that I think is amazing.
Yeah, sometimes there's one word in Bengali that you'd need 10 words. You still wouldn't get it right in English. Just wouldn't get it. You can just say that one word to somebody who knows it. It's like, yeah, got that. Completely get that. And then I'm trying to explain it to somebody. Well, actually, it means it's not quite that, but... So yeah, I do get that. It is lovely, actually, being completely bilingual, and I do feel I should have tried a bit more with my children. But, yeah, my intention from now on.
No, that was no judgment at all. I'm just jealous of you, that's all.
If I can ask you, Jusna, from the point of view of faith, because I think faith plays a significant role in our lives, in many people's lives. How do you find yourself as a Muslim woman in Britain?
I mean, if we're looking at faith, I think that moulds me to kind of who I am. So growing up, yes, I was Muslim, but there was more of a cultural element in there, because I mean, my parents were Muslim, but they didn't really know much about Islam in particular, like the knowledge, really. It was more, my parents were Muslim, so that's why we're Muslim, and then they, put that onto me. So growing up, it was just very much, yes, we will pray 5 times a day and we will fast during Ramadan. But we didn't really go into why we did it. It was just something that you did because your parents did it. And I'm not sure whether my parents understood, really. It was because their parents did it. So growing up, it was very much like that. And I think it comes to a point, I think everyone gets to a point where you kind of like look at yourself and think, why am I doing all this? What on earth is this about? And, you shouldn't just do something because somebody else did it. You should do something because it makes sense to you. And there was a point, I think it's probably just after college, just starting university, and I went to Bath University, and it was the first time really I was exposed to people of different cultures. Before that, I've always lived in Yeovil, and it was lovely, it was amazing. Oh my gosh, it was like, oh, a different world exists, where people wear hijab and it's completely okay and they're not looked at twice, really. And I didn't ever wear a headscarf up until after university. I just didn't have the courage or the confidence to be able to do that. And then I did, because I found myself, I guess, again, and realised that whatever I need to do it for a reason. And then I started discovering into my faith. I started looking into it, listening to different lectures, reading different books. And it made sense, and actually I changed parts of my faith because of it, because some of the things that I was doing was more cultural than faith-based, and I felt, well, if I'm going to practice a faith, it needs to be about the faith rather than mix it in with culture. So there are certain things I'm quite strong about. If it's Islamically it says this, then I would like to stick to those kind of scriptures. And then there's other things that like culture, that is pure culture. Like different celebrations, for example, that are cultural, or different foods that are cultural. So we would eat different foods, for example, but I would always make sure that it was permissible or halal. So it was kind of like mingling the two. And I think what my children know now about the faith, because they kind of go to the mosque and they're taught different things. Already they know more than me, so I think they'll have a different take on things as they grow up. So it's that ever-changing perception, really.
When did the mosque begin in Yeovil?
Well, it started out in a room in a church for Friday prayers, and that was probably, over 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 25 I would say. And then it developed to prayers in Ramadan, the night prayers, and that would be held in a takeaway, an Indian takeaway after hours. And then it kind of like progressed from there on in. And then there was a small mosque in town, and then now it's progressed to quite a big mosque. But I think the thing with the mosque is it's quite a multicultural mosque. It's not just one ethnicity, and that's the thing about faith. I think with Islam particularly, it's so multicultural, and everyone is accepted wherever they're from, which is lovely. Well, it's supposed to be like that. It's not always like that with different mosques, but I know our mosque is definitely.
Has Somerset changed?
I think so. I think growing up it was difficult. Sometimes you were always seen as the other, never quite fitting in. And then it got to a point, I guess, where it was more accepted, I felt. There was Somerset Racial Equality Council. They were trying to bring people together. The Macpherson report came out, I think it was 1999. I felt that things started to change from there on inwards. It's kind of like race equality was finally on the agenda. I don't know about the rest of the country, but in Somerset I felt it was on the agenda, and it felt positive for many, many years. It was going up and up and up and up. Somerset Race Equality Council were kind of getting funding from lots of different places. They were expanding into all sorts of different areas. They had 20 odd workers at one point, and then I think it was probably around 2008, I guess, where it was that financial crash with the banks and all the funding got cut from everywhere, that I felt there was a difference. And also when I could hear, like in town, like, people talking in Polish at that, I suppose it was early 2000s, 2003, 2004, which I first started to hear people talking in different languages, and it felt so amazing. It was like, oh, somebody else talking another language in Yeovil. It was great. It was lovely. And yeah, sorry, so from 2008 onwards, I guess, with the funding cuts, and then Somerset Racial Equality Council folded as well, they just didn't feel like, it didn't feel like race equality was an issue, or you didn't know who to talk to if there was an issue about, racist incidents that had happened to you or whatever. And then that's kind of increased, really. And then I heard about Somerset Diverse Community. I thought, wow, something's happening. And then Brexit happened. And I think Brexit happened, and I felt, it legitimised people, those views that people had, that they didn't feel that they could say openly. Suddenly they felt they could, because it was on the agenda and it was okay to say it. And it felt like, wow, we've gone backwards a lot. But at the moment, I think we're in the right direction. It's hard. It's been hard after Brexit, and I think probably people from the EU probably felt it more than I have, because I'm from the Commonwealth, So I feel it's going in the right direction. I think we as a team with Somerset Diverse Communities, we've done quite a lot, particularly over the lockdown, which it's been completely needs-led. We've been listening to people, the direction that they need support in, whatever that is, whether it's social groups or support with mental health or employment opportunities in different languages or whatever that is. Feels like something's happening, and I just get that buzz from it.
What do you think about the Black Lives Matter movement as well?
Well, I think it's amazing. I think it's really, really, just really positive. But I just fear that politics, people in power have a way of dampening down those views, to not make it mainstream and to keep it on the fringes. And I think that's been happening in the media a lot more, almost like labelling people who support the Black Lives Matter movement as left-wing radical extremists. And I think it probably puts off those middle people a little bit, and that's the fear that I have, that it's been hijacked and there's a political agenda to kind of like saying that they are kind of left-wing and we shouldn't, because they are anarchists and they will do this, that and the other. So I think originally it was very much like positive, and as time has gone on, there's some shady stuff going on in the background.
I feel that it has been a real cultural moment that don't happen very often.
And it was worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully it does bring around those conversations and moments of change. It can be the catalyst.
I fear, though, that with the political agenda, it's just being pushed onto the fringes, and you know what it's like when you're on the fringes. It's really hard to get your voices heard, and you're always, just written off as those wacky left-wing Guardian reading kind of, do you know what I mean? And it loses that legitimacy. It just does, and I just feel so sad about it. I don't know what we do about it, apart from...
But it's like the sort of trying to reframe it, that it's about statues and things. It's like, this is never about statues.
Gosh, this is it. It's almost like it needs a rebranding or something, I don't know, to bring it. But change didn't come without pain. If you look over, years and years of history, change only came about where people were willing to speak out.
Yes, and stand up and be heard.
This is it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's those people in power that make sure, with everything that they have. And I think it has brought people together who maybe wouldn't identify in a lot of ways, people from mixed race backgrounds and things like that, and people who are used to having either racist comments or direct or indirect racism against them, and felt that was just something they had to put up with. And I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, I think that's come across a lot, that you don't have to put up with it. It's not normal, and it needs to change. And there is some solidarity in that.
I also think that it's made a lot of white people question their behaviours and think about white privilege and talk about what that means and try and go out and learn more, and how do I become an ally, etc., which that's a very positive thing.
I felt that as well with a lot of white people. Maybe it's the circles, like friendship circles as well, who are that way anyway, open-minded, but it's definitely brought that people want to know a little bit more about structural racism and what that means, and that white privilege and just being white, how that can just be sort of you're kind of ahead of the field without even realising it. Just analysing that.
And how can you challenge that? Particularly if you're in a position of power.
Definitely. I think there's so many different shoots that have come out of the Black Lives Matter movement, which are really, really positive. The Race Equality Week that Race Equality Matters did, I think in February, that's probably come, I don't know if it has, but I think it's probably come about from that, and it's about changing organisational structure to kind of highlight race equality within the workforce. And like with anything, it starts off small and then it snowballs into something much larger, giving it time, and you just need those enthusiastic, energetic, sometimes individuals or organisations kind of pushing on that, really.
Yeah, and I think we need to see change because there's been a lot of words.
Talking shop, I know, yeah.
Do you think that most of the groups that you support like to cultivate their culture, heritage, or rather they are keen to assimilate and they don't really want to practice their culture or tradition?
I think it's a little bit of both, and that's probably, I think that's quite a positive thing. So I think most groups feel they would like to teach their own children about their cultural heritage. So whether that's through, having workshops around languages or storytelling or arts and crafts. So bring families together, almost like as a support, family support really, particularly where language is still an issue. So for those more sort of newly arrived migrants from perhaps the Romanian community who are more new, I guess, just that feeling of, do you know what, if we have a space where families can come because they don't speak the language, we can then support them and encourage them and also celebrate our own culture. But then there's that other side of things where groups would also like to be, I wouldn't say assimilate, but I would say be an active part of the wider community that they live in, and want to encourage the wider community to come to events that they're running. I mean, I know a lot of the groups, even thinking about the name of their organisation, have added, and friends. So for example, I supported Polonia and Friends, a group who are, mainly Polish people, and straight away the question that they had was, we don't want to be just for Poles, we want to have, even in our name, that open door policy, so we're very, very inclusive. So they said, let's have friends, because we have people who have partners from different cultures, our children are, it was just lovely really to see that they thought through that. And that's shining through with probably all the groups that I work with, having two sides, supporting and celebrating their own culture, but bringing people in and saying, celebrate with us. And we want to be part of your wider community, but also see what we're doing. So I know we've had some funding applications with the small grants fund that we run. I think it was an Italian group that wanted to celebrate Italian culture with the culture of Somerset through art and through, apparently there are lots of Italian churches in Somerset, which I didn't know about, like the architecture, and do something around, unifying two countries, which I thought was lovely, and then putting that artwork that the children had done in a prominent place in the town so people could view that. So I think that's the way that the groups from different cultures are progressing, and I really think that's lovely. I think that's the way to go, personally.
Jinny, from your perspective, as you have very experience in working with different institutions, organizations, what is the condition of modern organizations in Somerset? Are they inclusive enough?
I think all institutions could be more inclusive. I think that there is a will to do that, and organisations are going to need supporting about how to do that in the best way. And sometimes the will's there, but how to have the conversation and the knowledge of how to have the conversation isn't.
If you would need to give one advice to people from different backgrounds, what it would be?
I would say go.
I apologise. Obviously, in terms of cultural identity.
I was going to say, that was such an open question. Pretty broad. How are you fancy?
I would say don't be too rigid. Don't be closed into little boxes and think, I'm from this particular culture, so that therefore I need to keep hold of that culture and keep it as it is. Because that's not who we are as humans. We roam, human history is about roaming from one place to the next, and spreading language and food and faith and all sorts of other things. So I would say don't be too rigid about things, because you're really, really going to get stuck. Embrace where you are, and just look at identity as quite fluid. Look at identity as something that you can change and be who you want to be, rather than what your parents were, what you think you should be, because it will change. You might think that you've kept yourself away in your little box, and I've kept my faith and I've kept my culture and kept all of that, but your children won't be like that. They will see the big wide world. At some point you will have to let go, and I think just embrace that, really. That would be my advice.
Jinny?
Same question to you.
Answer something, Michał.
Stop deferring the questions, answer something.
When I came to the UK, what I discovered is the power of community. You've got lots of different communities, and you can become a member of different communities. Whatever you like or whatever identity you have, you will find that group of supporters, and I found that very empowering. And I would encourage people to be engaged, basically, regardless whether your identity is related to other country or to Britain. I think that's the place where you can build the bridges. You can make friends, and most of all, you can develop as a person, because of you can learn from other people. What I'm trying to say is to be engaged with Somerset Diverse Communities as well, because our role is to help you to find that communication, or to cooperate with other organizations and individuals in Somerset and make this place better for everyone. So more or less, yeah, be engaged, be there, be for all other people.
Yeah, so if you are looking for someone to connect with, like-minded people, what have you, the Somerset Diverse Communities team are very happy to help you and point you in the right direction and connect you with people that might have the same cultural interests, or if you want to set up a group of your own, we're also very happy to help you with that too.
Good plug.